Welcome to Transformative Principal, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principal. Today I am excited to have Andrew Terry on the program. He's in his 24th year in education. He graduated from the University of Kentucky with a Spanish degree and received his master's in education in 1999. He began as a Spanish teacher at the middle and high school levels before moving into administration in 2006. In 2016, he became the principal at Anchorage Public School in the Louisville, Kentucky area and has been there now for 7 years. Andrew, welcome to Transformative Principal. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on, Jethro.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. You come highly recommended from our friends at Pick My Kid, said that you were an amazing principal and you did a great implementation with their product, so they were happy to share that with me. And sometimes, that's where we get our guest ideas from, is from people who say, this guy's awesome, and so I'm glad that we can chat. So I do want to talk a little bit about Pick My Kid first, and then we'll talk about some high-quality instructional resources, which seems to be the latest buzzword in education that seems to be going around. So we'll get into that. Can you tell us a little bit about your adoption of Pick My Kid and how that went and what it was like before you started using that?
Yeah, so, when I first came into the school district, one of the charges that my superintendent gave me was to observe, look at dismissal procedures here at Anchorage, and then make a decision on how we can improve upon those procedures. So, I came in, and we are in a small little area. We have no buses. A lot of our kids can walk to school, ride their bikes to school. It's a very little park setting. A little Mayberry, if you'd say. And so it was kind of chaotic, I'll be honest with you. Kids were just getting into cars. I didn't know who was getting into what cars. Kids that were walking, somebody would say, hey, just jump in, Johnny, I'll take you home. And they would jump in the vehicle and go home. And so it was a little scary, from an administrative stance, trying to figure out who's where, whose car they're getting into. Did they get home? Are they with the right person? Are they, so it was just a lot going on.
So Andrew, that seems like it's kind of a natural thing to happen, right? And so why was your superintendent telling you to focus on that when you become the new principal? Usually they'd be like, behavior's out of control, or teachers aren't teaching the right stuff, or the scores aren't good, but he's telling you to focus on dismissal. That seems strange to me.
Well, one of the things that you look at as an administrator, obviously there's a few areas, but one of the big areas is Dr. Ransdale came up with several things, but one of the big things she said is hiring. You want to hire the right people.
Uh-huh.
If you hire the right people, a lot of times your instructional practices takes care of a lot of issues.
Yeah.
The next thing is safety. From a superintendent stance, and I get it, from a superintendent stance, if you don't have a safe school, you've got kids that are coming and not feeling safe coming into the building. You got teachers that are not feeling safe coming in and out. And so safety, dismissal, that was a big area, because you don't know where your kids are going. You're not assured where your kids are going. Do we have somebody getting picked up by somebody they shouldn't? Are we putting them in the wrong car? Do we know where they're headed? That's just a safety issue right there. So I think that was why that was a big focus. And
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, outsider looking in, just real quick, you go, that's awesome. That you have such a cool little community that they can just get into a car, and neighbors that take them home and watch from them, and everybody's looking out for everybody. But just takes one incident of a kid getting into the wrong vehicle, and then all of a sudden what looked really cool and awesome is no longer awesome.
Yeah. And those stories are the things that get remembered and ingrained in people's eyes and perceptions of the school, and that becomes a big negative when everything else could be going great, and everything probably is going great, and it's a wonderful little community. But then when that kind of stuff happens, it can completely tarnish that for a long time for everybody, right? And it's not something that's just going to go away. And people are going to remember that this happened at this school for as long as they live there. And it sounds like it's not a very transient community and everybody knows each other pretty well. So those things would have a huge negative impact on the school. And unfortunately, we are living in a world where those things do happen.
Mm,
And so
absolutely.
so you can't overlook that. And as much as we want school to be this great little community where nothing bad ever happens, the reality is that something could. And as an administrator, like you mentioned, you can't ignore that or think it's not going to happen here and you've got to do something about it. So pretty chaotic before, like everybody going everywhere. Why did you adopt Pick My Kid instead of putting other procedures in place?
As I started investigating and seeing what is out there from a dismissal stance for schools, Pick My Kid stood out in its simplicity, but its accuracy in the dismissal process. We actually did had it narrowed down to several different companies with Pick My Kid being there, and it was just as I had the committee with my superintendent, myself, and several teachers and some parents on the committee. Pick My Kid just stood out to all of us, and it was the easy pick. And so yeah, we selected Pick My Kid and started implementation basically the following school year. We waited because went through the process of selection during that school year, and then started implementation the following school year. And it's just been gravy ever since. It's really been good. It's definitely a transition for our parents, and we had some parents that balked at us because now all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're having to. What do you mean I have to do this before I come into this? As I come onto the property and push this button and enter in this change, and so it was definitely a change for our parents. Our teachers loved it immediately. They felt so much comfortable and at ease at dismissal because they could see this kid is going there, this kid is going here. They're staying in one of our after school activities, or they're a walker, or they're a car rider, whatever it was.
Yeah, so this doesn't prevent those things from happening. That kids can still walk home, ride their bikes, they can still get in a neighbor's car. The difference is that people are aware that that's happening, right? Is that a fair way to say that?
That is exactly right. It had nothing to do with how the kids were getting home. They still got home the same manner, but it had everything to do with we knew exactly where our kids were, and the parents did because the parents get a notification. The second that we dismiss the student, parents get a notification saying Johnny has been dismissed as an independent walker, or Susie has been dismissed to the front carpool to get in the car. And so, yes, all of the ways that kids got home still remain the same, but the fact that we and the parents were aware of those interactions.
Yeah, this is something that I find really fascinating because communication between school and family is so important, but it can be incredibly cumbersome. And this is a way that communication happens automatically, right? So you don't have to do anything different other than dismiss the kid to let the parent know that the kid's heading home and all that. And that to me is like the holy grail of school home communication, that it's not an extra burden on the staff at school, that it's actually just part of their daily work. That when you put a grade in the computer, then it updates it on the parents' side immediately, and you don't have to send an email saying I updated the grade. They can just go and check, right? So how has that aspect helped the communication overall in your school, if at all?
Yeah, no, it's the same thing with us. So you think of it from this, no longer do we have the days of a note getting sent in with Johnny or Susie, and I hate to keep using Johnny and Susie because they're so popular, but no longer do
They're
you
used to
have
it.
the yeah, no longer do you have the days where Johnny and Susie's mom's writing a note and putting in their backpack, and it gets forgotten. You
Yeah.
know, so then Johnny's got a note that he's supposed to go to after school homework help, but it's notes sitting in his bag. Teacher doesn't know that. Teacher's dismissing him the same way. And everybody's now all of a sudden we're looking, well, Johnny usually walks home, but he's not walking home. Where is he? And so the parent, rather than writing the note, can do an immediate change through the app, get on there, make a change from Johnny's usually an independent walker, but I need him to go to homework help at your school. Boom, they change it. It happens automatically. It's in our system. We see it, they see it, no issues.
Yeah. And then he's walking home after school, after the after school thing, and you can then notify the parent that he's on his way home without doing something in addition to what you're already doing.
Exactly. You got it.
So can parents also submit, like, my kid's going to be absent today through the same thing?
They can. Parents can do, they can communicate on the front end as well, if they wanted to. Now, I will say that we as a school have, because we use an infant and campus program that is statewide, state mandated. Mm-hmm. So from an attendance stance, there's actually an arrival system that Pick My Kid uses. We opted not to use that only because we have to use the state mandated information system, tracking system. So it was kind of, I didn't want our teachers to have to do double work as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely don't want to do double work. That is the worst. So like I had to check my daughter out of school for a doctor's appointment last week, and I had to call the school. I had to go to their phone message system and hit the little number to go to the right place for the right attendance based on her last name. And then my only option was to leave a message. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't do anything. And I just felt it was so cumbersome to communicate with the school that it was almost like I don't even want to. I'd rather just like text her teacher and say, I'm at the back door, send her out the back door. Because that would have been a lot easier. And I know her teacher and have his cell phone number, so I could do that. And that's something where being able to do that seems like it'd be much easier. Being able to send a little message saying my kid's staying after school today instead of coming home seems like a dream, because when the teacher pulls that up and she says, oh, sorry, Johnny, you're not going home, you go to the homework place, right?
Exactly. And it is beautiful. And it's really, our kids have access. It's, we have the smart boards and everything in the classroom. So at the end of the day, teacher just pulls it up on the smart board. The kid can actually see themselves immediately, and they'll look and they'll have a question like, oh, I'm supposed to be a car rider. Well, it looks like not now. You're going to the chess club today because mom has signed you up and you're going to chess club. So the kids have really become proficient with, they don't even have to go to the teacher anymore. At the end of that day, when dismissal's happening, they can see it on the board immediately. I'm supposed to go here, or I'm supposed to go there, or I'm dismissed, whatever manner. So if there's a change, they see it.
Yeah. So I don't know how prevalent cell phones are for kids in your school, but they are getting younger and younger, and so it's more common. Being able to have that communication happen with the parents and the teacher, rather than sending a text or a call to the kid in the middle of class, is probably a good thing also. Does that happen in your school?
Yeah, and because cell phones are not allowed out during the school day in our school, it definitely is. I mean, if a parent sends a text message to a kid, that cell phone better be put away in their locker or their backpack or their book nook area. Because if they're caught with it, there's a consequence for having that cell phone out. So now this alleviates that, where parents don't feel the need to, hey, let me text Susie, she needs to go to homework help rather than walk home. They can just put it in the system, and it alleviates that I need to check my phone because my mom or dad are going to text me something.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So what would be your advice if somebody's looking at Pick My Kid and wants to use that? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I would tell them to go through the same process that we went through. I think that you'll see that for us, Pick My Kid just stood out. I would definitely recommend, having a committee, not doing that, making that decision on your own, but involving some parents, involving some teachers who are going to be using the system, and then of course the administration that has to understand it as well. because that helped us in those conversations that we were having. Parents were able to say from the get-go, that system looks like something that I can use and it makes sense. The
Hmm.
teachers were able to say that same thing. We obviously were able to say that same thing and came together to make that decision. And like I said, Pick My Kid just stood out to us. So that would be my number one recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, going through a process to adopt something new. You mentioned that some of the parents balked at you. What was the way that you helped them see that this was worthwhile?
The reality was time.
Yeah.
Just, it's anytime you have change, anything that's new, and especially in our community, we talked about the community here, and it is not transient. I mean, I literally have the school's over 115 years old, so I have grandparents, parents, and now the children that are in school coming to school here. Families will move back specifically that have gone to school here so that their kids can go to school here. So change is not something that our clientele likes.
Yeah.
And I get that a lot. Like, well, when I was at school here, and I'm like 80 years ago, you didn't even
That's
have a
right.
cell phone.
Yeah.
So I think that was the big thing, is just that time to get used to it, because it was just something different. Now people don't even think about it. My new
Mhm.
families that came in, like my kindergarten families, that first year, they didn't know anything different. They're like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
It was my families that had been here for 7, 8, 9 years with multiple kids that were like, oh, this is so weird. Why do we have to do this?
Yeah. That's a funny thing with any kind of change. So I was principal of a school in Fairbanks, as I was mentioned before, and it was a middle school, and we had about half or so of our students who were military connected. So a third of them would leave every year, and we'd get a new third every year. And then we had about half who were in the community, and there was some transiency. So we probably kept about maybe a third of our students each year. And so whenever we talked about doing something new, it was like, look, we can totally change this because kids won't know anything different. And because they've never been here before. So 2/3 of our kids are going to be new this year. We can make changes and they won't know anything different. The
Right.
parents who have had kids here before will know something different, and the teachers will know something's different. But one of my counselors would say, now we're doing something different this year and this is what it's going to look like. And I said, you can just cut off that we're doing something different and so this is what it's going to look like, because they don't know what it used to look like. You don't
So
even have
true.
to say that. And just cut that out of your vocabulary, because it doesn't really matter, because nobody knows. And that was a really eye-opening thing, to really look at how many people were actually here last year versus this year, and recognize that it was a very small number, and those changes did not have to be quite as challenging. Now, a K-6 school that's been in the neighborhood for 115 years, that's a little different. But, it's the same kind of idea that kindergartners, I bet brand new kindergarten parents who are worried about leaving their kids and not knowing, like not communicating with them, I'm sure that was a big salve to them as well.
Amazing for them, especially
Yeah.
those new families as they're dropping off their new baby. And like I said, safety being a big deal for our schools. That was huge for them. So now people don't even blink at it. It is part of the process, and everybody's on board, and it's a great thing that we got.
Yeah. Now, heaven forbid something does happen that
Mm.
causes you to have to go to a different site and release kids in a strategic way. You have that system built in already, and you can know exactly how to do that. And I think that that's really good. Has this factored into your emergency communications plan or anything like that?
It absolutely has. So along with the Pick My Kid, there's the Kidio portion is what they call it, and it's a communication system that's utilized internally for our teachers. So rather than me trying to fumble around or have a group text that can fit everybody on there, the Kidio app allows me to communicate to every staff member as well as our police force that's right across the street, so that if there's some kind of issue or emergency, and we utilize it for practice with fire drills, everything that we do, we're able to communicate to the entire staff immediately via that system, and if we needed to parents as well. So it really is something that has just revolutionized our systems, our procedures, and our processes.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. So let's transition a little bit and talk about high quality instructional resources.
Yeah.
So I've probably heard that HQIR 10 to 15 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and talking with people all over the country as I do. Um, what do you think is driving that idea of having high quality instructional resources?
Looking at our student population and really trying to figure out how we can get every student, no matter what level, no matter the struggles or the enrichment, making sure that every student is getting what they need instructionally. And so, the HQIRs and having that evidence based data that's supporting selections that we're using to support our kids, I think is key and number one. Number two, I think it's making sure that there's consistency within our classrooms. So, you as a former principal probably know this. Like you hate it when you hear, in class A this is happening, and in class B this is happening, and I've got two third grade level classes, and different things are occurring within those classes. So everything's data now. Everything's data today. So looking at data, we're diving in. How can we make sure that you know Mrs. So and so and Mr. So and so's kids in different third grade classes are getting the same level of instruction? And so the HQIR helps to provide that.
Hmm. So define what HQIR is. We know it's high quality instructional resources, but how do you know that it's actually high quality? Because a lot of people can say that it's high quality, and when you actually get it, maybe it's not quite so much. So how do you know that it's high quality and what you're looking for as a school?
Right, right. Great question. And I really, like I said, through this process, have learned myself, and I'm sitting here going through my mental Rolodex on the names, but so I may not get the names right. So I'll just kind of speak vaguely, but there are several different websites that you can go to and check to see the levels that different programs or resources that you're using are rated based off of a standard that's produced nationally, and then as well as how they interact with our state standards. And so I think that's key, because everything that we do is driven by our state standards. And so we have to find a resource that's not only evidence-based, that's showing, high quality, but is also linked to our state standards, because that's what we have to teach off of. So those two measures, and looking at different resources that are out there, internet resources that are out there that will help us determine, okay, this is green, which is good, or this is red, we want to stay away from that, provides that level of consistency that we're looking for to help selection.
Yeah, so one of the things that I hear you kind of mentioning, but not explicitly saying, is that there's also this level of, in the old days we'd adopt a Basil, and that would be the book that we would use for everything. But now there's internet resources, there's lots of stuff out there that is, you know, specific books that are focused on different things, and there are the small books, and there are Basil still, and there's all the internet resources. Does HQIR combine all of that together, or is it really focusing on internet resources or the physical books, or what do they do there?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the HQIRs, there's different levels, for example. So obviously, the easiest for these companies to really rate, and for our state to really rate, are textbooks. Textbooks are going to be the easiest, because you're going to be able to really see where they're pulling their data from, how are they making those connections. So that's kind of your primary HQIR. Then you have what you call secondary resources, or secondary HQIRs, that really come in and help support. So that could be a website that's out there, or a tool that's used to help with intervention, the company that utilizes tools to help support. They may not have the same level as the primary HQIR as that textbook would, but it's been vetted through, and it will have a level that will say, yes, along with your primary, this is something that will work and will help support your students. Maybe independently, not so much, but as a secondary resource, absolutely. I
Okay.
don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, I think that was a good start in the right direction. I think what I'm gonna need is that website that you use to to see what aligned with you in your state, because as this becomes more popular, people are going to need those resources to be able to find them and know where they can go to trust and things like that. So we've always had intervention and acceleration or enrichment materials that we've used, and what I found is that when a teacher could get behind it, that oftentimes overrode the evidence base of it. And let me explain. So if a teacher's not on board and doesn't think that something's going to work, it's not going to work. Even if she quote unquote implements it with fidelity, it's still not necessarily going to work, because she gives off this vibe that this is not worthwhile. And I've experienced that, and I've had teachers adopt materials that are not evidence based and vetted, and they're just something that they think will work, and because they believe in it, it does work and it does help. And so you've got to find this balance between those things of somebody believing in something and thinking it's going to work, and somebody having evidence that it's going to work. And I had a math teacher who adopted I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was like karate math or something like that, and there were like belt levels associated with it. And this teacher adopted it, and she did great with it because she believed that it would work, and it was the supplemental thing, not our regular textbook or anything like that, but something that helped. Another good example of that is Desmos, which is this great tool, especially for higher level mathematics, that really helped in a lot of different ways. But when we adopted it when it was early, it wasn't really vetted very well as a high quality instructional resource. At this point now, it is, but back then it really wasn't, because it was so new and they were still figuring a lot of things out. So how do you balance those two things? And whenever you have that website, you can share it, and we'll put it in the show notes, even if that's after this. But how do you balance those two things of teachers believing in it and getting behind it, and teachers saying this program is never going to be what I expect it to be?
So I'll go back to, in essence, the process that we went through with Pick My Kid. It's the same kind of strategy. And not only do we want our teachers to buy in, which I 1000%, if the teachers don't believe, then it's pretty difficult to implement. Yeah. But then also having parents involved in that decision-making process as well, not to the same extent, but having them involved in that process as well gets some buy-in from the community. And so in our process of trying to figure out what we wanted to select, teachers were at the forefront. They were at the guts of it. So first thing we had to do was figure out what is our philosophy in specific areas. So for us right now, it was reading and writing. So what do we believe as a school? And then once we figured out what that looked like for us, that was our North Star. That was our guidepost. And everything that we looked at, whatever textbook, whatever HQIR we were looking at, had to fit within that North Star, that guide. And so with the teachers so vested in it, that made it easier. And I know not all the teachers were in it, but it was vetted out with a nice portion of our teachers who then shared that information out. The buy-in was so much more there when we made this selection that we made. Teachers were on board and they're pouring into it, and they're wanting the training and they're soaking it all up. So I think that's key to kind of help with the situation that the example that you gave.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's really a very good way to approach it, because you give people the opportunity to say this matters and this is what we're looking for, and to have that buy-in from the very beginning. Anything else that you want to say about these HQIRs that we haven't talked about yet?
So I found the website as we were going. What Works Clearinghouse is the resource that we use to vet through. And then Ed Reports is another one we used a little bit as a secondary, but really it was that What Works Clearinghouse was probably the main resource that we used that would vet through the HQIRs. And they have it broken down into the different areas: literacy, mathematics, science. You can check into. They don't have every core content area, but they have the main, literacy and math tend to be, especially at the elementary level, huge for us. So WWC.
Okay. What Works Clearinghouse? Good. I have used that before, so I'm glad that's something that I'm aware of. What's just interesting to me is how the the HQIR word has started coming up. It's just fascinating to me how things change and yet they stay the same. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think what you're doing at your school is awesome. I'm excited to stay in touch with you and continue learning from you about what you do. Is there anything else that you want to say that we haven't gotten to yet?
I just really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate it. Pick My Kid recommending me. I feel humbled that they put me out there, but really, I happen to be blessed and surrounded by a great staff here at Anchorage, and I appreciate people like you doing what you're doing too, getting word out on some cool
Thanks.
things that are happening.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I said, don't just send me somebody who's only doing cool stuff with Pick My Kid. I want to know
Right?
somebody who's a great principal and doing good stuff with Pick My Kid. And they said, well, that's all of our principals. And I said, well, you got to choose one who's doing awesome stuff. And so, yeah, this was good. I appreciate it. And thank you so much. And this has been a great time. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Andrew. And appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jethro.